What up, y'all? Back again. This is going to be a part 2 to this introduction to mud flood. I had stopped on the point in time where the Gregorian calendar had changed and added 800 to 1,000 years, and that the I and the J became a 1. Okay, and which stood for Christ in 2 different languages, Latin and Greek, I believe. And so there was an I or a J, and then the numbers to the year. So if it was 800 AD, that it had an I, 800 AD, or it would be J, 800 AD. But at some point in time, they decided, in our fake narrative of our history, they just turned the I, which stood for Christ in, I think it was Latin, and then a J, which stood for Christ in Greek. They just turned it to a 1, and all of a sudden it was 1800 AD. And so, people will talk about, how could that be? Because, if you try to do that today, it would never happen. But you got to understand, it was a whole different time period. There was a rapture. Let's be hypothetical for a second, because we really don't know exactly what happened, and this is all speculation. But there's a lot of evidence that seems to be backing it. And when you read the texts of Scripture, you'll find that whatever was said by the apostles and Christ, and what went on in that recent history up to 70 AD, and the stuff that you see in the earth today seems to completely coincide with the fact that this has occurred. So we just know that in the early 1800s there was pictures being taken of full-on cities that were what we call mud flooded out. There's no foliage, meaning trees and grass, and it's just mud everywhere. There's no people anywhere. There's nothing going on. There's no not even any animals. And if you do see these pictures, you'll see 1 or 2 people and 1 or 2 animals, and then later in time you'll just see a few more people, and it just kind of goes from there, steadily increasing. You also see empty cities with full-on infrastructure, made for people larger than us, and they're empty, and they're for millions of people. Because they had photos of major cities of the world in the early 1800s with nobody there, mud flooded out. And then what you'll find is you'll see that they were digging them out in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, even in the 1900s. It's almost like this reset was, gradual, but it was very close to our timeline. I'm 48 years old, so if we just go back to when I was 5 years old or something, or when I was born in 75, you'd still see a lot more remnants of this stuff than you will today, because that's how much more they've destroyed, and that's how much closer we were to it. But we didn't know. We had no idea. But it seems like there was some sort of rapture of the people of the earth. There was a mud flood catastrophe. They said a comet came through, and most of us that believe the script of the mud flood are also of the understanding that the earth is somewhat maybe a flat or concave type disc, with maybe a hollow earth underneath, and a lot of things down there. But again, that's speculation. But what we do know is most of us would agree that we're not on a flying ball. And so on the earth, that the comet came through around 1812, which I believe was possibly the enemy Satan being loosed from the abyss, and when he was loosed from under the earth, that there's nothing but water under the earth, aquifers, and when the sound of the pressure of this comet that came and went over the whole earth, it seems, the sound and the pressure caused the dirt to mix with the water under the dirt, the aquifers, and they basically blended together. The water mixed with the dirt from the pressure and the sound of the comet, and it caused the dirt and the water mixed and caused mud. So what you had was, and this is scientific geological science here, that this has happened in small areas of the world, even just a few years ago, from other such things, not from a comet but something else, and caused major catastrophe in a town or a city. And what you'll find is this is a worldwide situation. So it seems as if there's no people. So I'm under the impression that a lot of them were raptured, maybe right before the catastrophe, right before the enemy was released. When the enemy was released, it caused the mud flood to occur. All the buildings on the earth, on top of the earth, sunk, because anything that had weight on top of the earth had to sink. So that's why you have a lot of these structures, these buildings that are going into the ground halfway. Or, you might think that's half a floor, but maybe it's 1.5 floors. In some cases, that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with 15 feet, these buildings sunk, or 20, or to anywhere, they say up to 20 meters. So that's like 30 feet or something, I think. I don't know, but it's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot, man. And so you'll find that you have a lot of buildings with windows going into the ground, and when you look at these buildings, they were here before those pictures were taken, that era. And it seems as if they were glorious buildings, and we don't know how they built them with the narrative that they tell us. If we have a factual narrative that in the before the 1890s, we did not have electricity. We never had power tools in the 1800s. We didn't have a whole lot of people, right? Because everybody was sick. We didn't have, according to them, good infrastructure. We didn't have, heating and air conditioning like we do. We didn't have water treatment, barely. We were coming out of this era of plagues. We were few and far between, is what kind of the idea you get. And we were fighting all these different wars, supposedly. So how could have we built these glorious structures in these short periods of time, and with no cars, with no fuel, no hydraulics, nothing but mules, right? And wooden wheels. Like, that doesn't add up when you're talking about all these structures. Well, but the windows going into the ground is they dug some of them out. What we also find is that we dug some of them out, but we also had just built some of our infrastructure right up on it, because you can't dig them all out. And that would be, or mean to say, that the ones that were, where you see windows going into the ground, they didn't have time to dig those out. So they just put the concrete and the blacktop and the sidewalks or whatever, they just butted it up right next to the window, man, and called it a basement. And what my point is, and then maybe the saints went to the North Pole, right? Because it says in the very end, after the tribulation of millennial kingdom, Satan's loose for a short season, and then he gets the whole world convinced to go against the saints. The what is it called? The the camp of the saints. And, maybe that's at the North Pole, right? We don't know. But that's the war of Gog and Magog. And so it kind of looks like, we're ramping up towards the tribulation again, but that's all Satan knows. He did it several times. He probably did it in Babylon. He did it in Rome. Rome was the real one. Probably did it in Egypt. Who knows? Here we go doing it again. So don't think you're in a special time that is only built for this tribulation. There could have been many what looked like New World Orders and tribulations, but there's one main one. I believe that was the one that Satan believed he could actually win. And Nero seemed to be the Antichrist in 70 AD and 66 to 70 AD. But there was some sort of rapture and the mud flood occurred. And also what happened was mountains rolled down liquid mud. That's why on hills and stuff, you'll see that there's buildings going into the ground on the hills, and they just solidified the infrastructure, the concrete, the brick, you'll see windows going into the ground sideways. Because they had liquid mud rolling down from the hills and the mountains. And I do believe that that's what connected California from an island to the mainland, because anything before the 1700s, California was an island. We also had the different canals, for instance, the Panama and Suez Canal. They said we created those in the early 1900s, but we didn't. If you look at the old maps, they were there already. All we did was we dug the dirt and the mud from the mud flood back out and claimed it for ourselves. We just dug it out from the locks that were there already. And so a lot of this stuff that we're dealing with technology-wise was probably on the earth already, with a different motivator of control. They didn't use fuel for electricity, but they had electricity. But how did you change the calendar with nobody knowing? I believe it would have happened the day he got loosed, because there was nobody on the earth then. He changed it before what the Bible would call the rest of the dead come back to repopulate the earth again, which in most all of our humble opinions, we have no idea what that means, the rest of the dead. But we do know that the first generation in the early 1800s was called the lost generation, and they sure as heck looked lost when you look at them. It's really odd, and seems like in the 1800s there was live babies coming out of cabbage patches in the fields. I mean, the first movie ever created and made was I think it was in the 1890s. It was a black and white film of this lady. It's very short, 5-10 minutes, and she's pulling out live babies, what looks like live babies out of real cabbage patches. And, they have to tell the truth. So, and it's always, some of the stuff that you may think is craziness. Well, this is how the world works. And that's why people laugh at what they call conspiracy theories, but they're not. They're not theories. They're facts, that there's something conspiratorial that's been gone on. Because all you need, what you need to do to make a conspiracy from a theory to a fact is you got to make, you need to have one, thing that's supposedly factual, impossible to have occurred. It's factually impossible that it could have happened. And that's why, truthers get a real bad rap, but you're getting truthers from all different types. Really, the truther really needs, in my humble opinion, needs to click into the gospel, because you will be lost if you're a truther. But you understand, God's not a respecter of persons. So, with that being said, you can't there's different truthers out there. There's some people that would believe, aliens did this and that. And then, and then there's people that would believe the Almighty, and either the Almighty or the Almighty allowed the enemy to do it, that the narrative's completely different. And so you got to be aware. But yeah, so then we started repopulating this city to city, it seems as if, and because you'll see large numbers of people relocating into, for instance, Paris or something, going over the bridge. I mean, we're talking about tons and tons of people all of a sudden, and it's just weird stuff. And it seems like every city in America, we had full on infrastructure in America, man, and it was all burned down or looked like it got hit with some kind of deep energy weapon, what they call it, dew. But they'll tell you, like, some of these buildings, man, like, took 1,000 years to make. Nobody does that. And some man chipped away at it for his 30, 40 years of his life, and then somebody else came and chipped away at it too, and they created the exact same statues when there's like 12 of the same statues on the roof of a building or something. The other thing you want to understand is a lot of people say, well, these have all these pagan deities and pagan symbolism on these buildings, right? These statues and sculptures and, these friezes and frescoes and stuff like that. They may be gods and things. Well, you got to understand, when Christ left, or Christ's saints that were ruling and reigning with him left the 1,000-year reign, again, sin was back to occupying this, so it was tarnished with the sin. It was tarnished with the sin, and it was corrupted by the sin. Same goes, right? So the sculptures could have changed overnight because sin took over again. They may have been glorious, beautiful, godly, things that turn into gargoyles or something. Because, cars wouldn't rust in heaven, but they rust on earth because we're in a sin, where it's covered by sin. Things depreciate here, but they don't in heaven. Like when Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, if there were lions, they weren't trying to kill the humans. They weren't trying to kill mankind. They weren't trying to kill other animals, right? But when they sinned, and they were cast out of the garden or whatever, the animals became vicious. Mosquitoes grew a needle so they could draw blood from you. I mean, lions and snakes got fangs. I mean, or whatever. It's things changed, right? Because sin had been introduced. And so with that, it corrupted everything. And not even just flesh, it corrupted even objects. Because, like I said, if you had a car in the Garden of Eden before the sin of man, this sounds stupid, but follow me here, it wouldn't rust. It just wouldn't rust. It would stay as new as it ever was. And so you gotta take that for what you want. But also they defaced and refaced a lot of buildings too, because we know this. Because there's some places where there should be something, like a writing, and there's nothing there. Where it was there before and it's changed according to photos from before. So there's different things that have happened. They've dismantled all of the technology that we call antiquitech. The spires on the roofs of the dome buildings, we used to draw down free air electricity, which they call the ether. When you get up high enough that you can create and draw down with certain equipment like these things had, electricity for free. and it's eco-friendly. And they had fireplaces, but they were kind of covered up, and they had these little tools down there that, like what we would consider decoration for a fireplace. Those little they looked like, an upside down T or something, like the alphabet T. But they had these things down there, but they were to disperse electricity, maybe. I don't know. But they had bell towers. That was technology. They had organs in these cathedrals, but we don't know if cathedrals were even used as churches. We could have been just told that. We don't know, because they look like that they may have been. What if these buildings were able to turn on back in the day, before the end of the Millennial Kingdom? Maybe how what would we say? Fossilized. Over years and over time. Maybe these buildings weren't. Maybe they moved a little. They look like that they used to turn on. They look like computers and stuff. The way the architecture is. What if that architecture was like wheels and things? It looks like where there was movable parts or something, and it was all powered up. What if the whole grid of the earth was powered up, and these buildings were all connected by this power grid? And maybe after the Millennial Kingdom, the power grid got knocked out, and then they dismantled the Antiquitech, so it would never work again. And then they want us to destroy our own world down here, right? So part of that would be, and they don't want nothing for you for free, so buy our fuel, But I'm going to stop here on part 2. But, these things start to add up. The maps, every building of the earth got sunk in the mud, even in Australia and New Zealand, in Europe and, Africa and America, and in South America and Russia. There was no ice and snow until the early 1800s. They had to shut down Parliament in Russia, and you'll see they had these makeshift fireplaces that they had all of a sudden build on the outside of the building, because they didn't need heaters during the Millennial Kingdom, and they didn't need air conditioning either. Maybe the people regulated themselves, or maybe it was so glorious that it had a way of regulating you to what you wanted, what you needed, what you deserved, what you felt. But it talked about in Isaiah, I think it is, that there would be 7 times the sunlight. And so, anyway, this is part 2 to Introduction to the Mud Flood. Thank you for listening, especially if you got to the end. Please like, subscribe, give me a thumbs up. And, till next time. Thank you.